So it's medieval times, you're a barrel monger or whatever, and you hear a big ol' hullabaloo. You're not sure what's going on, so you get a little closer, and you hear some lady sounds like she's in labor. And as you get closer, you realize, yeah, there is a woman in labor in the middle of town square. But that is not some lady. That right there is the queen. And soon, she's holding up this baby in the air, letting everyone know that yes, a woman in her 40s has had a son, and yes, he looks like his father, and yes, this little bun fresh out of the oven in the middle of town square is going to be king of like 30% of Europe. But what she didn't know was that he was also going to be the Antichrist. Ahoy! First of all, as you can see, I'm trying something different for this episode. There was way too much to talk about if I wanted to animate it all, and I've been talking with my patrons about trying something new, so here it is. Second of all, this episode is sponsored by Blinkist. Blinkist is the best way to devour nonfiction titles fast, because on Blinkist you get over 3,000 titles, each condensed into 15-minute summaries. I love this. I'll be honest, I'll sit and listen to 15 minutes of how startups work, no problem. It gets time to pick a book to read, and I go, oh gosh, that's a commitment. Let me think about this. Okay, I might be able to pencil in this one. But Jack, reading is my passion. It's about the journey, not the destination. And to that I say, you're not wrong. But with Blinkist, you can get a much better feel for a book before picking up a copy. Because if you're going to spend however many hours learning about the next great migration or King Leopold's ghost, which I highly recommend, you want to make sure it's worth it. The first 100 people to go to Blinkist.com/JackRackam are going to get Blinkist for a week, long enough to listen to like 20, 30 books easy. And if you decide you like it, you'll also get 25% off a full membership. Now, a little background on how the papacy ended up going to war with the Holy Roman Empire. Ever since the Pope got his own kingdom in 754, and especially after he started proclaiming Holy Roman Emperors, you might be surprised to hear that medieval politics didn't get holier. The popes just got a lot less holy. This culminated in the 900s in a low point for the papacy, both politically and spiritually, known as the pornocracy, which is pretty much what you think it is. About 100 years later, Pope Gregory VII comes along and says, hey, Holy Roman Emperor Henry IV, you're not emperor because only the Pope gets to appoint emperors. And Henry IV says, well, you're not the real Pope because only the emperor gets to appoint popes. You're excommunicated, not if I excommunicate you first. And so it went for several decades. The year is now 1197, and the papacy and the Holy Roman Empire are not friends. So here we pick up on our boy Frederick II. Freddy is only 3 years old when his dad, Holy Roman Emperor Henry VI, dies, and so his mother acts as a sort of regent, and whoops, she's dead too. But never fear, Freddy ends up in the loving arms of the Pope. And not just any Pope, but the Pope who killed as many as 1 million Christians and burned down one of Christianity's holiest cities. Give it up for Innocent III. Don't ask me how he ended up as Freddy's godfather, I have no idea. Now, Freddy had also inherited the kingdom of Sicily from his mother, which at this point was all of southern Italy, and the Pope wasn't a huge fan of the Papal States being a Fred sandwich. So he let Freddy keep Sicily, but gave the Holy Roman Empire to this guy named Otto, who was a good choice, because unlike Freddy, who is from the Hohenstaufen family, Otto was from the Welf family. And all you really need to know about them was that in large part, the Welfs were the ones who actually liked the Pope. Well, except Otto was challenged by Frederick's uncle, and then he ended up attacking the Pope anyway, but that's a story for another time. That time being 2 years ago. Roll clip! England supports a chap named Otto. The Pope also supports Otto and excommunicates anyone who doesn't, because Prince Philip the Alternative is a Hohenstaufen, and nobody likes Hohenstaufens. Except for the French king, also named Philip. But even with God ostensibly against them, Philip and Philip prevailed, until some rando conveniently murdered Philip Hohenstaufen in his sleep. In the end, it didn't make much difference, because someone feeds Otto after midnight, he marches on Rome, and tries to take over Sicily. So the Pope has no choice but to pull Frederick out of his back pocket, make an awkward alliance with France, and declare war on Otto and England. Frederick takes the reins of the HRE. And to avoid this sort of thing happening again, Innocent lays down some rules where the Pope gets final say over who gets to be in charge. And that's how Frederick II ended up in charge of the Holy Roman Empire anyway. God, I love being able to come back to old videos. It's like having my own cinematic universe. I just need to make enough history content until the point that I can just be like 5-minute crafts and make each video like 95% reused footage and call it a day. After taking power, Frederick made some laws about centralizing the government and taking power away from his vassals, but that sort of thing definitely won't be important later. Oh look, crusades! Yes, it's time for another crusade. A quick recap of Western Europe's adventures in the Holy Land so far. Crusade numero uno, some French and German nobles carve up the Levant, not what the Byzantines asked for, but pretty solid as far as impromptu conquerings go. Number 2. Oh no, one of the kingdoms went poof. Better go attack some random Muslim city instead. Oops. Third Crusade. Oh no, everything disappeared. Better take Jerusalem. Oops. But pilgrims can travel now, so that's something. Fourth Crusade. Oops. So at this point, there's nowhere to go but up. Well, Fred kinda puts it off for later, but the people who do go do pretty well for themselves. The Ayyubid Sultanate offers to give them Jerusalem, but instead of taking it and running, they say, "Ha! You'll soon tremble in fear before the will of God. We're taking more! But you're just as exhausted as we are." That's where you're wrong, because while we've been fighting, Frederick has been organizing a new army, one that's ready and itching for a fight. And when they join us, we'll wipe you out any second now. They're not coming. And they threw themselves headlong into the Muslim army and lost everything. Okay, Crusade number 6. This time, Fred's got some skin in the game, because his mail-order bride was Queen Isabella of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, which at this point was just a couple of cities on the coast, but not for long. Unfortunately, he's stopped by an epidemic, and everyone tells him to stay home. Everyone, that is, except the Pope, now Gregory IX, who says, "Fake hoax! I'll show him to procrastinate like this!" And he excommunicates Frederick on the spot. But Frederick knows how to make things right, so as soon as he gets his health back, he goes straight to Jerusalem. But after being banished from the church, his army isn't what it used to be, and he knows it won't perform well. So he has to be clever, and he comes up with a brilliant strategy: negotiation. Okay, so you get Jerusalem, I'll go deal with my revolts, but the Dome of the Rock stays Muslim, okay? Yeah, fine by me. Oh, one last thing? Yeah. I'm kicking out all the Jews, cool? Sure. So Frederick turns to the Pope and says, "See? Single-handedly captured Jerusalem with, no casualties. How's that for my Christian duty?" Never mind the fact that the Kingdom of Jerusalem erupted into a 15-year-long civil war before he even left. But the Pope says, "No, you were excommunicated. Excommunicates can't crusade. So, congrats, you're double excommunicated." So after being excommunicated twice for being the only person to successfully recapture Jerusalem since the First Crusade, Frederick returns home in a bit of a sore mood. And then his butler or whoever catches him up with everything he's missed since he left Jerusalem. And they go, "Welcome back, the bed's made, your dukes are very keen to hear from you, and we're at war with the Pope." Yeah, so Gregory had been getting Fred's vassals in northern Italy all rebelly, so when Fred comes by asking him to please stop that, Greg responds, "Actually, they're my vassals. Don't you remember when Constantine the Great gave all of Italy to the Pope?" And Fred says, "No, Your Holiness, I don't remember that because that never happened." And indeed, the whole thing was based off a document that was forged, coincidentally, around the time the popes first got a hold of land in Italy. 400 years after Constantine died. Fred then goes to the cardinals asking if maybe they could ask northern Italy to stop rebelling because the pope doesn't know what he's talking about, and he gets excommunicated for a third time. And from this point on, the last 3 decades of Fred's life are just one long back and forth between quelling rebellions and backslapping the Pope. Because remember that whole thing about centralizing power across his domain? That may have created a lasting foundation for the future of nation-states in Sicily, but in the fustercluck of the Holy Roman Empire, that kind of thinking was not appreciated. And to be fair, Frederick knew that. His son Henry, however, was a different story, and Prince Henry got all the princes and dukes so angry that they made him sign a document giving them the right to mint their own coins and approve or deny any legislation proposed by the emperor. It was a little bit like a German Magna Carta, only without nearly the same modern fanfare. Anyway, Fred throws his son in prison and tells him he's not mad, just disappointed, and then it's back to some good old-fashioned Pope fights. Fred beats Austria and northern Italy into submission, and he's ready to simply capture Rome and call it a day. Right after he beats Sicily into submission, and then he's ready to capture Rome, and then Greg dies. And that's a problem. You see, if you're fighting a war against the Pope, that's one thing. You'd be surprised how often that happens. And Gregory was a petulant little mischief maker who no one seems to have liked well enough to defend him in any of his wars. But if you keep fighting after that Pope is dead, well, then you're not just fighting one corrupt official, then you're waging war against the Catholic Church itself, and that's a real bad look. So instead of capturing Rome and absorbing the Papal States into the HRE, Fred backs off and waits until Pope Innocent IV is elected. And Innocent IV seems like he'll be chill, because he's from a German noble family, and all the revolts in Germany have been quashed, and even the Pope-loving Welfs have fallen in line. But it turns out Innocent IV had no chill. And so it's more rebellions, more treaty breaking, more failure to negotiate, more slander, more attempted assassinations. At this point, Fred is a Muslim Saracen heretic with a harem because the Pope probably read that in a book somewhere and figured that's what all heretics do. And what do you know, one of the cardinals dubs him the Antichrist for good measure. So there you go, official decree from the church, the Antichrist's name is Fred, and we're 800 years overdue for Judgment Day. That or we all missed the boat. Like, obviously, Fred was conspiring against the Pope, but it's not great when the Pope gets caught trying to straight up assassinate a guy either. I won't bore you with the details, but the Pope uses good Christians' tithe money to prop up a rebel king, but between marriage, negotiations, and overwhelming force, Antichrist Frederick II manages to come out on top, until he loses one big battle, and then everything unravels and the entire empire rebels all at once. Fred dies peacefully, believe it or not, but his son Conrad only rules for 4 years before he dies of malaria, and then the whole empire fell into chaos for 6 decades before anyone ever got crowned again. Hey, look at that, an end card. Kinda forgot I could speak in these. Special thanks to my patrons for giving me the time I needed to mix up my formula, and thank you so much to Dennis Blinov for helping me research this episode and figure out what was going on. Let me know what you think of this longer format. I'm gonna try a couple episodes like this, and we'll see how it goes. Until next time.